Warm welcome to our program. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Rabbi Gershom Sizomu, who is the head of the Abu Yadaya community in Uganda. I'd also like to welcome some of the other prominent members of the community, and one of them being Iso Wanani, who is with us here as well. Here he is. We're going to find out some things about this extraordinary community, both historically and in the current circumstances. So, Rabbi Gershom, before we come to your own personal journey, which is a very fascinating one, and before we come to talk about the current affairs in Uganda and the issues that you're facing as a community, and of course in the COVID era, we'd like to hear a little bit about the history of this community, who the Abu Yadaya community are, how you come to be Jewish in the middle of Uganda, and just fill us in with a little bit of the background, please, and then we'll talk about you in a moment.
Okay, thank you. So the word Abu Yadaya is a Uganda word for the people of Judah. And Abu Yadaya is not only unique to us, but that's what Ugandans call every Jew. Whether you are from the US, England, Australia, the word Abu Yadaya applies to you, and you could hear the word Judah. Abu Yadaya means those who belong to the tribe of Judah. This community started in 1919 when the leader, who was a military general in the British colonial government, decided to desert the military, read a Bible that was used by the missionaries to convert people to Christianity, in translating the Bible from English to Uganda. In so doing, he became familiar with almost each and every chapter and each of books in the Bible. At the end of
Rabbi Gershom, I'm sorry, we missed a little bit of that through some interference. Can you take us back to who this person was again, please, in 1919?
So in 1919, a general in the British colonial government, of course not British, but local general. He was a general in the Uganda Army military, but was used by the British colonial government to colonize most of parts of Uganda and East Africa. So he was a collaborator with the colonial masters that came in Uganda in 1888. He also helped in the translation of the Bible from English to Uganda. And by so doing, he became familiar with each and every chapter in the Bible. He, however, was confused by the existence of a New Testament. You know, of course, this Bible had the Tanakh, which is the Hebrew part, but it also had the Christian gospel. In so doing, he actually got very much interested and connected the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. He particularly was inspired by the story of Abraham, Avinu, and Sarah. The story of Isaac and Jacob, and the entire story of the Exodus. But he was confused by the Christian teaching of Jesus and why circumcision and the Torah and the laws of Torah were not observed. When his questions were not answered by the Christian missionaries who wanted him to be Christian, he circumcised himself and his sons and servants, and declared that he would not follow Christianity, that instead he would be called Abayudai. He immediately began to observe the laws of Torah, Shabbat, Kashrut, Agim, and everything that would be observable in the Torah. He ripped off the New Testament from the Bible, gave it back to the Christian missionaries, and said, from today on, I and my followers will be called Abayudaya, meaning the people of Judah or the Jewish people. That is how the community began, and their observance was based on readings from the Torah, mainly. Whatever the Torah said was law, came law to this community. Of course, biblical Judaism, as you might know, had its own challenges. And I happen to also test some of these challenges because rabbinic Judaism hadn't yet been adopted in our community. And as I can speak later, that the yearning for rabbinic Judaism is what took me to rabbinic school.
Were any of his, was he or any of his followers officially converted to Judaism, or did they simply take on Orthodox Jewish practice to the best of their knowledge?
In 1919, he was not in touch with any Jewish community. And he was not in touch with Israel. Of course, Israel was not existing. It was not in existence at that time. So whatever practices they practiced was directly from the Torah and with their own interpretation. For instance, Melacha, which you know is explained in the Mishnah Talmud, Melacha to them was anything that done by hands. So on Shabbat and the Hagim, they refrained from any work that you use your hands. So if you use your feet, it's not. So that was their interpretation of Melacha without access to the Mishnah and Talmud.
So they had just the written Torah, but not the whole oral law, as you say, Mishnah, Talmud, etc., with all of its interpretations.
Exactly, they were not exposed to that because they had not encountered any Jew. All they did was self-motivation and choice, and actually, would say a defiance to Christian missionary conversion. They were very defiant because all they did was the opposite of what the Christian missionaries expected.
Okay. So what happened after that?
In 1926, there were two traveling Jews, and probably they were business people. And my grandfather was one of the people who started this community. He was a younger man in 1919, but he remembers that there were two Jewish people who came to visit after they were told that there was a community in eastern Uganda that called themselves Jewish. So two people came with, it's not known whether they were rabbis or they didn't actually disclose their status, but they were Jews. They helped the community construct a mikvah, and that mikvah is still existing. we still have it, very old and dilapidated, found in a farm that doesn't belong to the Jewish community, but we decided to buy land around the mikvah so that we can save it as a historical site for our community. And we used that mikvah when our community went under rabbinic conversion in 2002. But it is said, my grandfather remembers, that in 1926, the two people who helped in the construction of the mikvah also introduced the community to some form of rabbinic Judaism, which they did not get really because they did not stay for long. But then they encouraged everybody to go to the mikvah in 1926. So all the people in the community, including the founding father of the community, went to that mikvah in 1920. But not knowing whether the mikvah was supervised by rabbis or just other people, ordinary people. I'm sorry to say ordinary because I don't know if that's the appropriate description of people who are not rabbis. But unfortunately, he died, the founder died in 1928, before the community had established itself very well. And so there was a leadership challenge. My grandfather, who took over from him 5 years later, was still young and did not have the economic capability to run the community like the founder did. So the community faced a lot of challenges, including the challenge of Christian missionaries who required anyone to go to school, to Christian missionary schools, to convert. And these people did not want to associate themselves with Christianity, and so they did not go to school. So my grandfather, my father, my mom, who were born in this community, did not go to school. So let me stop there to see if there is another question that I can answer.
Right. So they make a huge sacrifice. They are committed to being Jewish. They are Jewish in terms of certain practices which are based upon their understanding of the Bible, but as yet there isn't a fully fledged kind of rabbinic community of the kind that we know today. There's not Mishnah, Gemara, the whole of the oral law is still missing, but they're making huge sacrifices even to the point where they're not going to school. So how then does the community begin to become fully Jewish in terms of, in two respects? Number one, in regard to becoming knowledgeable of what I term the oral law or rabbinic Judaism, and at what point did they start to have a process of formal conversion through interaction with established Beth Din in Israel or anywhere else?
So in 1962, the Israeli embassy opened in Uganda, in Kampala. And the ambassador and his team are told that there is a local Jewish community. They decided to visit on Erev Pesach. That's the 14th of Nisan. So on the 14th of Nisan, 1962, a team from the Israeli embassy wants to have a Seder with the Jewish community of Uganda. There's no internet, there's no WhatsApp, there's no phone, so they come unannounced. So we have surprise visit. 1962. I'm not there. I'm not born yet, but those who were there, my mom, my father, and my grandfather, say they were surprised to see that they are visited with people who actually look Jewish. According to them, they are default. and they came and they said they were Jews. But then they walked into the synagogue with their shoes on. And I remember these people were biblical Jews. And in the Bible, it says, God said to Moses, take off your shoes because the ground you are standing on is at Kodesh. It's a holy ground. And for them, a synagogue is a holy ground. So they interpreted that mean that if you go into any holy ground, you have to remove your shoes, like Moshe did. So when the Israelis walked into the synagogue with the shoes, there was doubt whether they were actually Jews. But at the same time, because the Torah does not speak about the Seder, it only speaks about Kurban Pesach, they were busy preparing the Kurban Pesach. And the visitors were really shocked about this. So it is there when the visitors realized that this community was observing biblical Judaism and they needed help with rabbinic Judaism.
So this is a funny situation. Here are these people following the Korban Pesach, taking their shoes off in synagogue, and these Israelis arrive who are supposed to be religious, and the community looks at them and says, you guys are not religious, we're religious. They've got the wrong way around, haven't they?
Exactly, they almost threw them out. Why do you enter our advanced Kodesh?
Fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah. So the contact begins with Israel. Is there a process of conversion, or do the Israeli authorities simply accept that people have been to this mikveh which was built, and with that they've become fully fledged Jews and they're accepted as part of the Jewish community through a process of conversion? Or is there something else which is required of them?
Actually, the Israeli authorities were not experts in halakha, and all they did was to transmit the story to Israel. And there was a yeshiva in Jerusalem, I don't know which yeshiva, that offered to educate 2 of our younger people so that they would come back to Uganda and teach rabbinic Judaism and probably start the process of kosher giyur. Unfortunately, Idi Amin came to power, he wrote to the Israeli embassy and forbade Judaism.
That's 1971.
Yes. So before 2 young people went to study, Amin came to power and intercepted everything, messed up the country, and our Judaism was forbidden. So our community, the Abayudaya community, I grew up during Idi Amin's time when we were not allowed to wear kippot, go to the synagogue, observe Shabbat, observe Ris, even as
tell me, how did you manage with Brit Milah?
Not Brit Milah, unless my father was a Moer, and that's why I'm a Moer. I'm also a Moer. Got it from my father. So he used to perform the Brit Milah in the jungle, out of people, so that nobody could say that they were observing Judaism. So we grew up during that difficult time of Idi Amin, and all the dreams of getting rabbinic instruction from either the yeshiva or from Israelis who used to come in the 60s, ended with the coming to power of Idi Amin. But of course, Idi Amin was overthrown on Erev Pesach. I still call it a miracle because that's what my grandfather and father were both rabbis declared it to be. Amin was overthrown on the 14th of Nisan.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, Rabbi Gershom, so you've got your grandfather is instrumental in starting the community. Your father is hugely involved. You grow up in a time when this terrible time when Jews are not permitted to observe Judaism. You have to go off into the jungle to be circumcised. You have to keep Shabbat and Kashrut in secret, etc. You've got this in your genes, in your blood. You decide that you want to become a rabbi. So how do you go about it?
Absolutely. And actually that comes after a very long time, because after 1979, freedom of worship was restored. I became, at the age of 12, I got very much into studying Hebrew from the book that the Israelis had left. You know, they had even left some books about rabbinic Judaism. So we had an idea from self-teaching, reading. There was no teacher from anywhere. We didn't even know that there was a Jewish community in the US or in England. We only thought about Israel. So in 1992, after 1991, one of the people, the first secretary of the embassy in 1969, had been deposited to Nairobi, Kenya, as the Israeli ambassador to East Africa. This man was called Ariel Oded. The chronology, he passed on last year, and he was buried in Jerusalem. So when he came back to East Africa, the Israeli ambassador to East Africa, he invited me to Nairobi, because at that time I was already following the footsteps of my father and my grandfather. And so it was Yom Kippur. I went before Yom Kippur, of course. And during Yom Kippur service, I was the only black person in a synagogue in Nairobi. There's a synagogue in Nairobi. And so it was filled with Europeans, Israelis, and some few American students. And so two of those students were curious to know who the black man seated near a VIP. You know, I'm seated with the Israeli ambassador to East Africa in the synagogue during Yom Kippur service, and I'm also following the service.
So this is another great irony that here you are in a country which is a black country. It's Nigeria, and it's a place where you from Uganda should be completely at home, and you walk into a synagogue, and the irony is that everybody else is white-skinned and you're the only black person there. That's just totally bizarre, isn't it?
Actually, I was very, very uplifted by the fact that, you know, I am in synagogue. They are reading Hebrew prayers that I'm familiar with. The tunes are not familiar, but when they said Baruch, this is what I've been doing. I had found new brothers and sisters. I was in another heaven in Europe. And of course, with the ambassador who told me actually, he told me surprising stories of their visit in 1962. He showed me a book. I actually have a book that he wrote in Hebrew. I was not able to read the Hebrew at that time. I could not understand. But now when I read and I understand, I get fascinated with some of the pictures. I have it. You can actually Google him, Ariel Ode. You might find some of his findings on the internet, because he was an author as well.
Let me just move on a little bit because of time, because we want to talk about some of the contemporary issues. But you went to the School of Rabbinic Studies at the American Jewish University in order to be able to get smicha. Where is that? In Israel or in America? Where does this take place?
I actually I missed some of your statements.
I'm asking you this, the American Jewish University, when you went for rabbinical studies, where was that geographically? Was that in Israel?
The education was both in Israel and the United States of America.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The American Jewish University is in the United States, but I studied in Israel at Mahon Shechter.
Right. I'm just interested. I know that you're a very completely and totally observant man in every halachic sense. Shomer Shabbat, possibly more than many members. Not possibly, almost certainly more than many members of our community. But your smicha was a conservative, was under the auspices of the conservative movement. And I wonder whether that was because the Orthodox rabbinate, the Orthodox yeshivot, the Orthodox smicha were not accepting you, or because there were other factors at play. What influenced your reason for taking a conservative smicha when in terms of your standards of practice and observance, you are, without any doubt, certainly capable of being an Orthodox rabbi?
Yeah, actually, after the fall of Idi Amin, we suffered a long period of isolation from any Jewish community. And this is a peasant farming community surrounded by a prosperous Muslim and a Christian community with good schools and hospitals. So we faced danger of extinction. And for that long, none of the people in the Jewish world reached out to us until actually a conservative Bet Din came in 2002 and they offered to do a cure. There was a cure in 2002 and the subsequent years, and they began to actually call us brothers and sisters, to support us in one way or the other, and even to offer me to go to rabbinic school. So I'm talking about a group of fellow Jews who took the initiative, reach out to us. And that is what happened, ended me at the American Jewish University. Of course, I was surprised that
Have you had, therefore, any response now or any reaction from the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel in relation to the status of your community?
Actually, that one comes after we obtained a conservative conversion and also a conservative smicha. We go into the news, and now the Orthodox react to us in the same way they would react in a conservative Jewish community. So that's the reaction.
So let's just tell us now a bit in more contemporary terms about the size of the community and your practices, what happens, what the community does apart from the synagogue services, how many people attend your synagogue services, how many people come to synagogue on Shabbat and on weekdays, your minyanim, etc. Just give us a bit of feeling of the way in which the community now functions with you as its head.
Yeah, actually, we have 8 villages with 6 synagogues. And I have trained the younger people become prayer leaders and the Gabari team in those synagogues. And we do have services every morning. We have minyan every morning. And because many people go to work and go to school, we don't follow up to them. We don't have communal services after them, but we encourage people to have services wherever they want, wherever time finds them. But early morning, we have minyan, because let the firin, and Monday and Thursday, we read from the Torah and post Shabbat. We observe kashrut. We only eat kosher animals and birds. We have kosher knives from Israel, and we have taught ourselves, plus reading and also visiting shohatim who have helped us learn how to do our own shechita. So we do by our standards, prepare our meat, be kosher, but mostly because we are subsistence farmers, we eat vegetarian, beans, vegetables, and just on special occasions, we can go into shechita so that we can have some meat as well. But what are the numbers now of the Jewish community of Uganda? We have over 1,000. We have not carried out an official census, but we estimate our number to be approaching 2,000 from 300 after the fall of Idi Amin. Idi Amin had squeezed us so much that many people had gotten overwhelmed and left the community. So
is the community continuing to grow?
Yeah, our community is growing from within, but we also have some curious people who convert to Judaism. Come to me, they learn, and after a given period of time, we convert them, take them to the mikvah. We do a circumcision. If they are not circumcised, we do leshem kiyur. If they have done circumcision, we can do hatafat dam, and they actually are taken to the mikvah and they become a part of our community.
And how are you regarded by the other Ugandans?
Many Ugandans really don't understand why we are Jewish. Many Ugandans think that Judaism is only unique to white people, to Israelis, and not to Africans. It's weird for them to see us. You know, it's like the Buddhist. If there is a Ugandan Buddhist, they think Buddhism is for the Indians, and the Judaism is for the Israelis and Jews. It's only Christianity and Islam that is for Africans. So that's how they think. They think it's weird. But now that I'm in the parliament, I educate members of parliament, and I have members who actually ask how they can also join Judaism and how they can become members.
This is a piece of information that I was coming to, because our audience don't know this, but you are in fact, as you've just mentioned, a member of parliament. And I just want to know why you sought that office. For what reason you decided to take a political position and to go into parliament?
In the previous, we have been tortured and intimidated hands of people who want to discourage us from being Jewish. Of course, I spoke about Idi Amin, but there were so many other people, especially the local leaders, those occupying local positions, who use the politics as a tool to torture, torment, and discourage our community. So I wanted to put the record right that being a Ugandan, I can also become a leader and use leadership to help all people. And so mine was a statement of tikkun olam and interfaith cooperation. Being a minority, I used that platform of tikkun olam and interfaith, and I got overwhelming votes from Muslims and Christians. They liked my agenda. So it was partly to mend a relationship with our neighbors, but also bring some pride to the members of our community and show that everything is possible, that we are not inferior, that we cannot be regarded as the other in this community of Uganda.
So when you sit in parliament wearing your kippah, does that evoke any kind of reaction amongst your co-parliamentarians?
Actually, at one point, a point of order was raised. Because in parliament there is that parliamentary dressing, a suit, necktie, and so on, and a kippah is not part of the accepted. So there was a point of order raised by a member of it who is actually running for president, a younger musician who is giving our current president a hard time because he's so popular in this country. So he raised the point of order why I was wearing a kippah. And the Speaker of Parliament announced that I was the leader of the Jewish community, equivalent to the Bishop of the Church of Uganda. And therefore it was appropriate for me to wear a kippah like a Catholic would be allowed to wear how do they call it, a rosary? I don't know how they call it. So a kippah became an accepted dressing code in the part of Uganda on record. And since then, I have seen members of parliament bow to me whenever I come in, because that's what they do to their bishops.
Wonderful, wonderful.
But also, we have a group in the parliament, and it's called the Parliamentarians for Israel. They wear the Israeli flag that is also together with the Uganda. They support Israel, and whenever there is Israeli independence, participate in celebrations here with the ambassador, and they are actually Christians for Israel. And because of that, I represent Israel today. I'm privileged to say that I don't get a negative reaction. There are few, very few actually, that give me that negative reaction. But majority of members call me Rabbi, and others think that I'm a bishop. You know, for them, they don't understand the Rabbi. And a leader is like a bishop. So there's that mixed reaction. But overall, we have respect as a Jewish community because of my presence in the...
That's amazing. That's really quite amazing. I'm going to bring in some others in a moment, but just before we go there, very quickly, the issue of coronavirus, COVID-19, everybody thought that Africa would be absolutely swamped by it, like Ebola and AIDS, but by and large, for some reason which people don't seem to understand yet, you have been pretty well spared the terrible effects of this plague. Can you just very quickly fill us in on whether your community or the community around you in Uganda have been affected, and what measures the government have taken to try and control the spread of it?
Actually, as we are speaking here, the president of Uganda is on national television making a statement about COVID. I think it's the 15th statement since the outbreak. Most of the country is affected by the lockdown, and as we speak today, numbers are growing rapidly. Numbers of infection, especially from the trucker drivers that go inter-border, you know, from Kenya to Uganda to Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi. Many of the infections are from those trucker drivers and their contacts. But the lockdown has affected many Ugandans, including the Jewish community, especially people who depend on hand to mouth, meaning they do daily work and they look for daily bread, as they call it here. They go and work as casual workers, either they are at washing based waters or they are riding motorcycle, taxis. All these have been affected, and therefore it becomes quite difficult for many of the Ugandans, including our community, to get access to food. But we thank the Conservative Kent has recently put up a concert in the US and raised the funds. And as we speak now, there is a food distribution to all our communities. There is an ongoing food distribution to all our communities.
Has the lockdown prohibited prayer services?
Yes, the lockdown has prohibited all services. We are at home. We are not allowed to congregate. I personally have the opportunity to always have prayers with my family. All my children are out of school. They are back home. And, you know, it's really weird. It feels because I was there during this time. So it takes my memories back there. Only that in the lockdown, we are allowed to sing the Kadodi and to do kiddush and be happy at our Shabbat table. You know, that's the only difference. But then my not going into the synagogue and taking out Torah and procession with it, singing and reading from the Torah and giving a sermon is actually so sad. We are missing something.
You mentioned family. Is there a role for women, for rabbis' wives, rebbetzins? Do they play any role at all? Is it a patriarchal society, or is there scope for women to have a part of the community, to have a voice, and for the rebbetzin, rabbi's wife, to actually have a role as well?
It's a very good question, since I have been the first formally ordained, trained rabbi. Our community is learning to deal with me and my wife, but my wife has mostly taken over the responsibility of feeding our local community. So every Shabbat, before the lockdown, we prepare food, you know, in Kema, in Torah, you know, and in Torah, in Kema, of course. We have communal meals, partly on Friday, and mostly on Shabbat and Hagim. My wife is the head of all that. Make sure that everybody gets well fed on Shabbat and Hagim. As I teach Torah. So I give the food, it provides physical food.
I'm going to turn for a moment to Esau, if you unmute, because I know that you're one of the activists of the community, and you were the first person that Ben Leon met in the community, and you introduced him to Rabbi Gershom. So tell us, Esau, what it's like to be part of the Jewish community of Uganda.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to everyone. As the rabbi has given the details of how our community came about, I'm so glad that a fourth or fifth generation Jew in my community. Both my parents, my mother and my father, they were all born Jewish, and I was also born Jewish. I'm so proud to be part of the Abayudaya community and to have grown in a Jewish community, learning Judaism and practicing Judaism has made me proud of my religion. And also, given that now our community has gotten many connections to other Jewish communities within Europe, United States and Israel. So I have been lucky that I've traveled to other Jewish communities. For the past 2 summers, I've been working at Camp Rama in Poconos. and this was a very great experience for me. And back in 2018, I was also part of the young Jewish group that went to participate in Taglit, the first Abidaya group to be in Taglit in Israel. And this was also a great experience for many of my age mates from my community who got a chance to go and visit Israel.
Can I ask you, I hope it's not an impolite question, but have you ever suffered either anti-Semitism for your Jewish beliefs or racism because of a matter of color?
Well, I will say here in Uganda, I was like in my early age. I went to a Jewish community high school, and here most of the students, they were Jewish. But when I joined university, I went to a public university because as of now, our community doesn't have a university or an institution of higher learning. So when I joined university, and on Friday, some students used to see me with a kippah, and they would wonder what that meant. So when I told them I was Jewish, most people, when you talk about Judaism, sometimes they say, oh, you are the people who killed Jesus. That's what comes in their mind. So some will question you about that. And sometimes others, there are some other Muslim students who know about some politics about Israel and Palestine. So some would question you about the Israel government is taking our land and so and so. But it has no much bigger impact or negative impact. Mostly it ends there. So I would say there are very less anti-Semitic things in Uganda. And I would say throughout my life, I've experienced very few, and only when I was in college.
Racism?
Racism? Please, can you say it again?
Yes, racism. Have you suffered racism for being a black person or a black Jew?
Well, here in Uganda, because we are all blacks, so I've never experienced that. And also I would say, even when I got a chance to go, the chances that I've been getting, because I was in the USA, I went to Germany, I visited Jewish communities in Germany and Israel. I've not experienced that. Every Jewish community that I've visited has welcomed me with an open hand as a brother from another community, as a fellow Jew. However much I'm black, but they have welcomed me very much, and they have given me whatever is needed. So I've not experienced any racism throughout all my travels and all the visits.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. Those lovely insights. I want to turn back to Rabbi Gershom and to ask you, Rabbi Gershom, before we finish tonight, what are your aspirations? What do you hope for the community? What is it that you wish to achieve?
My main aspiration for this community is for Israel to open doors. Right now, we are struggling with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. We have people who are Israel, but our status as to making a not yet clear. We have clearance from the Jewish agency. We are a recognized Jewish community. We are among the recognized Jewish communities of the world, according to the Jewish aid. But Mr. Im, the Israeli Interior Ministry, is still struggling with the fact that our community is in the diaspora, and probably our community is not orthodox to the standards of the Interior Ministry. So that is what is still remaining, but our is for us to be free to go to the land of Israel. like another Jews have done from the US, from Africa, Ethiopia, and other places, India. So that is a bigger aspiration. While we are in Uganda, we want to keep growing. We want to keep growing not only in number, but also in knowledge. Young people who want to learn rabbis, and I want to encourage our brothers there to help that our people can get rabbinic education or Judaism, so that we can have as many teachers as possible here to grow our community. We wait for the opportunity to go to make Aliyah. In Uganda, we are Ugandans, as you know, and we also have aspirations. I mean, actually influenced my thinking about one point I thought of also becoming a leader of this country as a way of showing that we cannot just stand by as people use political position against people. Even in history we have had so. Hitler used the political position to tap and kill many. So why can't you also positions as the means of protection? So,
all right. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I had actually had wanted to give our audience opportunities for questions as well, but your story has been so fascinating that we've just wanted to hear it from beginning to end. It really is quite an extraordinary story, an extraordinary community, a real insight into a whole different world. And we want to thank you, Rabbi Gershom Sizomu, for joining us, and other members of your community. Thank you as well to Esau for joining us. I know there are others. Thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight in this really, really fascinating, brave journey of a group of people who just decided that they were going to swim against the stream and not accept what was being offered to them at that stage by the Christian missionaries, to come back to the fundamentals of Bible, grow through the written text, expand into the oral, eventually into the oral text as well, and to become a fully fledged community. It's just an extraordinary story. It always makes you wonder, why do people want to be Jewish? There are other easier ways to live in the world, but this is a community that just decided that this was the right thing for them to do. This is what they wanted. That's what their souls told them that they needed. And it's been quite extraordinary in terms of being able to hear for this last hour the journey of this community and the point to which they've reached. I wanted to say a very special thank you to Ben Leon for introducing us to the community in the first instance, and for so patiently and so brilliantly coming up with the idea of being able to WhatsApp Rabbi Gershom, so that we've heard him. It hasn't been perfect, but I think most of us got most of it, and so I'm sure it has been recorded. If anybody would like to hear it again, you'll be able to get this on our archive in the course of a couple of days. But Rabbi Gershom, thank you so much for being with us. We wish you well. Wish you hatzlacha rabbah. Shalom to you. May there be continued success for your community. May you continue with your work in Tikkun Olam and bringing a good name to Jews and to Jewish communities and spreading good throughout the world, in your part of the world and our part of the world. We look forward to being able to, all of us, to be together in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. May it come speedily in our days. Thank you all for joining us.